it just transformed my life. And I feel Radhika's book is one such book, and I pray and hope that people pick up that book wherever they do. And if they don't find it in bookstores, they find Radhika somewhere in their life. If we make it that simple, then it's really easy to be us. We'll stop looking at the world outside to compare ourselves and start feeling low about ourselves.
Most people struggle and doubt when something exciting and positive is happening to them. And I think that this book helps you to just be more comfortable with that. Often without any outside interference, we ourselves are a major factor in conditioning a specific, unique, unrequired response. Even though we may never have consciously wished to have this response and may try to dismiss it time and again, we discover that it's only getting harder to disengage with this repetitive response. This happens to me a lot.
I think unless the Atma and Paramatma even have a chance of becoming one, if that quest doesn't even occur to us, then everything remains just that, an external showing off. And the self remains parched. And it requires courage to strip away the masks and look inside and find the emptiness and then try and fill it with something that is meaningful. But without that, what is life about?
That she has tried to help us to connect to the divine by removing those layers which are also superficial, and they don't allow us to be connected to our real self. Be prepared that you have to read every word, every stanza, not only with your eyes but with your heart and soul, to get to the depth of this book.
Everything that this book asks us to do, these blind children do every single day. Their lives have so much more meaning. They wake up, they don't see the bright sun, they don't see the blue sky. At night they don't see the stars, they see nothing. To them it's an eternal night, eternal darkness. And yet the joy they bring to this world is amazing.
The more time a given piece of information spends in short-term memory, the more likely it can be retrieved later from long-term memory. Once established, it becomes a memory trace. It may take as little as 24 hours for an emotional memory to become ingrained throughout the brain.
I've never idolized anyone, to be honest. I never wanted to be like anyone. People ask me this question, must be millions of times, that who in your profession has been your idol? I said, I think I always wanted to be my own self, and that is what my biggest strength was, and that is what I keep telling young kids as well. Don't try and copy anyone. Everyone's got their own strengths and weaknesses. Everyone's got their own, I think, ways to live their life, and I wanted to be myself, and I'm very happy to be myself. And probably you should be your own icon, and till the time I can see myself in the mirror, and every day if I can see myself in the mirror, it makes me happy if I can do that.
You only recognize two colors, that's black and white. No. So there are no grades in So, and my mom dad kept telling me that there are a lot of grades in this world, and I just couldn't figure it out. So I lived my life in absolutely black and white color. Those are the only two colors I could recognize.
When I was competing in an Olympic final, it wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be a walk in the park. So one had to just accept that you're going to feel nervous, you're going to feel anxious, you're going to feel insecure. And I think the acceptance of that difficult feeling that you have when you're under that tremendous amount of duress just helped me prepare for reality. And that's why I chose that path. It was the tougher path to choose, to take. But I think I tried many ways. There were phases during my sporting career where I tried to relax and feel good about myself and go to competition, enjoy the competition, as many people like to call it. Enjoy it. It is no enjoyment. It is nothing but pain. It is nothing but suffering. So I think acceptance of that situation is the most important thing to me. When you're under that pressure and when you're under that stress, I think you create a lot of resistance from within against it. And I think that is the biggest mistake. By embracing being vulnerable, by embracing the reality, it just helped me come to terms with reality and face the challenges in a better way.
I think we're not seeking it at this point from a scientific point of view. I think from a scientific point of view, it's more specific problems that we want to solve at this time. Problems of poverty, problems, for education, problems that are essentially lingering around in the world. But from a meditative state of point or a metacognition point of time or point of space or whatever, science is essentially trying to only look at one angle, and that's quantum. And we believe, or it is believed, so as to say from researchers. So whatever feeling, consciousness, whatever we call as consciousness, or whatever you've talked about in the book, is all at a very quantum subatomic level. And that quantum subatomic level, and you were talking about faith, so I was considering that if you ask me a question of what is faith, it is a number of probability. And that probability, when it goes at a quantum level, and if I can hone that quantum level probability to make it work the way I want, I've led my life. And that's so interesting in this book, and that's why
fascinating, because I think today we live in a very complex world, and the world, as you would know, based on what you do, is filled with artifice, thanks to technology in some ways. So there's always a good aspect to technology and a bad aspect to technology. And because of that, the only thing we can hold on to are our stories that ground us, that connect us, that anchor us. And for an actor, you can use very many techniques to tell that story. But the most important technique that you must use is just to be honest.
Do I need the mic? Thank you for being here. I'm so fortunate to be here. This is obviously the next family that we have adopted. We are very recent recruits as parents, and the husky spirit is minimal in us. Our younger daughter started Northeastern in August, September last year, and they were nice enough to ask me to speak today and also comment on the fact that as women, with Women's Empowerment Day showing up, represent the woman of today or the woman from the yesteryears, but the woman who is here to represent her family, her country, the idea of humanity and consciousness, and we connected as people. So my husband and I visited Northeastern for the first time in August, September. It was, the least I can say is that it was a very stimulating environment. We thought it was the greatest place for our child to deepen her inquiry. And Northeastern does offer, as you all know, being alumni, parents, a very intellectually stimulating, a very spiritually stimulating, culturally stimulating campus and resources that are helping so many of you and so many of our children and us in moving forward. And I hope that we all are able to move forward with a lot of caution and a lot of spirit in this, in this world, which is full of harmony that is not seen or less spirited. And so I thank you, Yelena, for being here and hosting this for us, Olivia. Also, we met President
being the one arm that gives.
Sorry, you want to put the screen back? So while we were there, I'm sure all of you went through the same experience. We met, we went through the first few days of the sessions and the academic sessions and the introductory sessions, and then we were invited to tea. And I don't know if all of you have met President Aoun, who's a wonderful, humorous, very sharp person, very warm. We also met Andrea, we met Lauren, we met a lot of the people in Northeastern. And we became another family. And our kids were in Sri Ram in Delhi. So that was, as you know, a very cohesive sort of setup. We were very involved in the school. And so this was a step up, and we're very happy and fortunate that we're here. And I'm sure all of you are grateful, and that's why we see all of you here. So just to thank all the people who've been supporting the book. I am a therapist, and so I do have a confidentiality contract that works with all the people I work with. And these are people who are, I think, larger than life, so they came out to help and support the book and the series of books. And the fact that they believe in the work, and the fact that each of them has struggled to find their place and discover their you. All these testimonials are very heartfelt, because they have each worked with me as well, and so they've journeyed with me for a length of time. And this kind of support, I think, is just comes out, from your heart center. I don't think it can be construed or put together in any other way. So to the subject of you, and I've had a chat with a couple of people, and the idea of you is so difficult to grasp, right? It is not something that is, it's not something that you can sense subjectively. It is not an idea or an expression. It is something that I think each of us realize that as we start to observe it, it demonstrates its willingness to show up. And when we are oblivious to it, we are removed from it, is when we step out of our heart center and we deviate from who we are. And today I think that's the issue with humanity, because if we were exactly where we were meant to be, aligned with the universe, fully spirited, we would not have a world where there would be so much disparity. There would not be a world where there would be so many power-hungry people, and we all know, living in India, that there would be so much poverty and disharmony. So I think the beginning, to me, and I'll give you a really amazing quote that always stirs my soul. Dr. George Berkeley, in the 1600s, said something really interesting, and you may have heard of it. And he said, when a tree falls in the forest and you're not there to hear it, does it make a sound? So if anybody wants to comment on this, or I'll carry on with I believe this quotation really explains the length and breadth of the universal sort of awareness. Because if you don't observe your reality and you remain oblivious to the world and the inner realm, then you're not really evolving, you're not going forth. And that's what I've seen in my clients. That's what I've seen in people that have surrounded our lives, our family and friends, and I'm sure some of you will agree and some of you will not, and that's the way we are here, with lots of perspectives. So feel free, this is going to be an interactive session, feel free to comment. You is it's not a thing that can be objectively grasped. It has to come out of a group like this, or a consciousness like this, or a consciousness anywhere else that starts to cohesively think and align with each other, and then have fewer pockets of disharmony. To me, that is the greatest. That to me is, I grew up with parents who allowed me to question my you within me, and every time I did that, for whatever reason, I felt more empowered. I don't know if they think they made a mistake, because I'm all over the place. With lots of people in my life, and 2 beautiful girls, and and lots of diverse clients. And to me, actually, the diversity really is the universe celebrating its manifestation, because in the diversity, with every unique person carrying a unique signature, is that aligns us together and brings us to complete that circle of you. So the birth of you really is my sort of like engagement with, or my question in the world was, who is God? So from the time I was really little, my parents had no sort of like religious limitations for us. And I kept questioning this. I think a lot of people do as well. Have any of you questioned the idea of God or divine or your place in the world? And I did this for so long. I struggled with this. I thought of my name. I was like, oh, is it like connected to Krishna? I had my own versions and lots of playful versions. It was fun. Until I found that the first God had to be your mind, because without your mind, you cannot operate. And the second God had to be, and this is when I was little, the second God had to be spirit, because you can have a mind, but something else is definitely going on. There's something that's helping the world stay aligned. Marriage is a constitution that works everywhere in the world. Failure is something that is looked down upon everywhere. Success is something that is seen as great. accolades are hard to come. So the world was operating sort of in the same space. We're seeing the sun, we're seeing the moon, we're seeing the sunset, the sunrise, all of that was happening. And yet, and there are people who question God and fought about God, and there's all this religion and, the fights and all the philosophies that divide people. But to me, I had to quieten the mind to find God, to find spirit. So I set about trying to figure out a way to do this, and so you go to college, and I studied psychology. And as we know, as Northeastern parents, we are so involved in our kids' application process. We are always looking to see what better they can do. How do you put together a portfolio? It's all like a real stressful situation. But when we were growing up, things were so simple, right? You finished school, you found your way, you went to college. I went to Sophia College in Bombay. The fees were 700 rupees. It was very easy. I got into Xavier's as well, but I chose Sophia because it was down the road. It was easy for me to go to school. So we found, I think our generation found the closest way to sort of like liberty and the closest way to find ourselves out. Today's generation is looking for more complex methods. They are looking to go through, because they have a complex world, because they are in a chaotic space, and they're looking to compete with each other, nothing wrong, get you to perfection. Like Abhinav says, perfection is an untamed beast, and we'll get to sports and all of that later. But so I found myself going through college, loving psychology, and then by the end of 5 years saying, I've done enough. I need a break. I'll get back to this whenever, which I did 6 years later. But because a few people, we had a short conversation, then I went off. Very quickly, just to recap, to know why I got into this space, it's an interesting story. So Rupert Murdoch came into the country in 1990. There was a gentleman called Subhash Chandra Goyal who was launching ZTV. I was the flunky. I went day one, and there were 4 people in the office, 4 big bosses, and one of them interviewed me, and I got a job. And I made the first Z logo, the green and pink logo, and the first Z whatever, jingle, whatever. Very happy, made a production blog, walked around for a couple of months, no work. And then somebody from Lintaz, the GM, was retiring and opening his own sort of like film company. I walked in there, and he said, I've got 3 films of floor, can you take them? And I had no experience of filmmaking except that Z label, which did nothing for me, but the logo. But I was going to XIC, Xavier's Institute of Communications, but I was also seeing my husband now and my boyfriend then. So the classes were more entertaining my boyfriend, and we were seeing each other more than I was going to class. But I had the confidence, so I said, yes, I'll take the films. And I landed up making 24 films in those 22 months. And those days, filmmaking was go buy the U-matic, buy the beta, go meet the GM, get your brief, all of that, do the film, do all the artwork running around, and the films are complete. So I think it was about taking responsibility. That's my first lesson that I learned. That if you go out after something and take responsibility, and you stay integrous to the process, you will find a way. Then came Z, it started coming back. I had the first show on TV. I quit my job. My boss said, there's no way you're leaving, so let's do this together. So we had a co-production called the Bonvita Quiz Contest. I don't know if you know, I've seen it. It was the first ever show on TV. We had great TRP ratings. We had it for a bunch of years until I sold it to Derek. And then I did the brand equity quiz, whatever. I had a production house, and life was great. And then we got married, and I came to Delhi, and Delhi was very news-based, so I didn't really enjoy it. So I started a PR company, and the first client was Omega, second was Favaluba. I think the universe was showing me a sign and just sending me clients, and it was just great, but I hated the job. I hated PR. It's the one thing in my life that I really didn't like, because you have to represent something you don't believe in. And I think that was my second lesson, that when you're not integrated to your purpose and you don't align with what you believe is right, because my greatest idea for life is, if you believe in something and it aligns with what the universe thinks is sacred, the universe will make sure it shows up in your life. And I take this to every Olympic player. I take this to every little boy and girl that cuts their wrist or tries to commit, tries to end their life. I also work with a lot of young girls who've been molested. So I work with a lot of the dark side, of this life. And I find that this one belief and the other belief that you've got to learn to look for the good. And I started looking for the good in my purpose in this universe, and I found that I needed to go back to psychology. So 6 years later, I was back studying, and I've studied till I keep studying. And my husband's brother always says, "Teri padhai khatam nahi hoti," which is, when are you going to stop studying, for heaven's sake? But I think this subject is so vast and enjoyable that I'm still studying through all my clients and through their diversity. So that brought me to this wonderful practice, which is really, I started studying the mind. And to most of us, I'm sure, in your corporate fields, in every vertical, we study the mind. We study the mind because we need to understand how to let go of limitations, how to, raise our imagination, how to align with the universe, how to create better relationships with our clients, with our products, all of that. And to me, what was important and what I learned was that if you have to make an impression in your life, if you have to stand up and look in the mirror and say, I validate my self-worth, I know this is a good day for me, I can be a better mom, I can be a good wife, I can be, whoever I need to be, I can be a productive person in this universe, then you need to believe in yourself and you need to have that self-worth. So through the practice that I had while studying the mind, I started focusing on the subconscious mind. Now, subconscious mind is 90% of your mind. So all your habits, all your emotions, your imagination, your beliefs, good or not good, true or not true, all of that resides in the subconscious. Everything from the time that you are actually conceived, and I can say this not because it's a philosophy, but because I've done regression therapy, and when I say regression, it's very, it's understood as past life, and people get into this whole like past life, in between life, which I also value, and I think I've brought a lot of people into their sort of like calmer spaces, having, gone into that space. However, today I will validate it because I say to people when they work with me, let's go from where you are to where you need to be. If we go running around looking for what happened right in your past, to me, we're all one. We are molecules, atoms, physitrons, neutrons. All of this is a photon, and photon is light, and we're all light beings. We've all had saints walk on water, do miracles, all of that. We've grown up with these stories, we've heard these people, and to me, that is a component, that is an entity, that is a part. It's not an idea or a philosophy. It is people who had come here to remind us that we're one stream of consciousness. And so the study of the mind, literally, it's interesting because Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, said, when you leave the body to self-correct, body functions, body has a natural tendency to function on its own. It's when we interfere with it, it's when we interfere with the body, that the body actually craves to move to self-perfection, self-correction. So medicine by its own design looks at the outside for interference. It gives you a pill, you go to a psychologist, he gives you he labels you. But what we've learned is interference is an inside issue. It's thoughts that create your destiny. It's thoughts that take you to the next point that you need to get to. So the birth of you was really my experience and study of the subconscious mind. And I found that with there's one thing that I did was every single client I worked with, whether it was psychosomatic illness, whether it was working with allergies or phobias or traumas, real or imagined, working with Olympians, other athletes, the algorithm was exactly the same. The algorithm was empower the person to find himself. Of course, there's technique, and of course, there are ways. There's study of neurolinguistic programming. There's the use of hypnosis. The use of hypnotherapy. There's use of experimental psychology. There's use of development. So this entire gamut of tools that we've grown to use. But the idea is if we go back to the origin of where our initial sensitizing event to an issue was created, and we're able to. It's exactly like, just simplified. If I'm parking the car here and somebody hits my car, and I'm really angry, and I come into this hall and I'll be sitting here and I let it go, and then I come here another day, another week, next Sunday, I come to watch a music concert, somebody hits my car again. I'm okay about it, and then I move on, and this happens 4 or 5 times, and the 5th time it's sitting choking at you. You want to find somebody to choke because you want to make sure. So until chaos inside of you is not released, it's very hard to come to a place of calm. It's very hard to come to It's very hard to come to a place where you can look back and say, I'm fine, I believe in myself, I value where I am, and I have the impetus to go on. So I developed this, this reading and the science, and I was working psychosomatic illness for many years until Rajivardhan Rathore. I worked with him, he got the silver medal. I worked in London, Beijing, all of those Olympics, and I learned from these great masters that success to them was just a conceptual reality. They were athletes and they needed to get the medals, but what was really, really important was who are they inside of themselves? What do they want for themselves? Did they believe in themselves? Because you have to have that belief in yourself, and you have to have that narrative that works for you in your everyday life to find yourself moving forth, to find yourself being happy, to find yourself addressing your you. And that's where the books came from. And for me, why you was important was because everybody who came to work with me had already been to a couple of therapists. And everybody had labeled them with more, you're obsessive compulsive, you're this, you're that. So it took me longer to first get the label off and say, no, you're fine where you started with, let's go back to where you started with. And it was very important to empower the person not to now start believing in me. I should have a role to play. I shouldn't be the one now who becomes the next, stick for them to hold. So every session I've ever done, except if it's working with the Olympians, has been in that session, in that time, I will teach them to work with their breath. I will teach them and narrow down the tools so they have what it takes for them to move on. They don't have to do a second session. And when they feel I've made a shift, then they come back for more work. And along 24 years, the only way I've got work is because somebody goes back and then sends their uncle, and somebody goes back and sends their aunt, and it's been a life full of people and clients and really amazing episodes, which I will take you through a few of them so you get where I'm coming from. So you'll have, say a lady comes to me, she was an Olympian sister, and she said to me, am I audible? And she said to me, so when people call you, they don't think that it's worth your time. That's the downside of working with bigger people, because they feel that you can't work with, anybody. And I'm like, even if your car's been scratched by a screwdriver, you could be angrier than the person who's actually been, raped or molested. And that's really the truth. There are people who come to me for luxury treatments who take longer to get better than people who had the hardest, lost a child, had the hardest life, lost their money, all of that. And this lady comes to me and she calls me and she said, I don't know, and I was like, okay, tell me your story, okay? And she goes, actually, I don't know if you want to work with this. I've developed sort of, what did she say, fear? No, I don't like the color pink, so can you help me? Okay. And I need to work with you tomorrow because, so she was sitting at her desk and she's a single mom, and her boss came to her and put down a file. It was a new branding for the company, it was pink. She said, I have no clue what happened, but I can't go back to work. I just need to see you, and we have a great we have a presentation next week, so can you help me? So I had her on board. And again, she goes through this whole thing of like, is it okay, is it worth it, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we go back working on the color pink, and we do some regression therapy, and she goes back to a time, and I'm like, the space and time that you're at, how old would you be? Now she goes, so she could be 4, she could be 3, she could be 15. But I'm not here as a CID to figure out if this is the real story. I'm here to say, okay, what's going on? And she is in a car accident, as she's revealing to me. And this could be something she's picked up from a movie, but the point is that we have to take her from her predicament to a point where she can go back to work. We go back, writing this story, and she goes back to a time when she was 4, she had an accident, she was with the mom, and she believes that pink flowers fell on her face. Next, her mom is in hospital, she's in coma, 2 months, nobody tells her what's going on, she's scared, and there's your color pink. Now, do I know that this is the color pink that I have to get after? No, but I'm hoping that it is. We go back, we take her back to that time, I prepare for the accident, she's now 2 years old, she's playing with the ball, so we rewire her neurons as we know, the brain is, has neuroplasticity where you can rewire the networks, you can rewire cortical stimulations, and we land up rewriting the story over and over again, give her a few anchors, she comes out of that trauma, she looks for time with the mom when she's playful, she forgives her mother for, whatever's in her heart, she forgives her mother for having, abandoned her, and she goes back to work and she's fine. Now, is this a miracle? No. Is this science? Maybe not. Did it work for her? Yes. So the point is that, when I write about you, it's about saying you're okay exactly in the pocket of time and place and consciousness that you are purposely invited by the Spirit to be at. You are, and sometimes you're not, and then we can change that. So I do also work with the spiritual realm. I help people work with their conscious minds. I help people work with their subconscious. But the idea is, each of us has a story. And each of us has a narrative which is successful, which takes us to happy places. But each of us also has a story that makes us feel sad. Some of us mask that sadness, some of us address it. To me, the books were a method for you not to, you don't have to come to me. It's easy to be you. But get out there and address your issues. The first book took me years to write. And then I stopped and then I wrote again. And to me, it was easy because it's very easy to be me. I can be a, friend to my children's friends. I can be a friend to the parents. I've been born a happy person. I married the man I loved, and life has been great. So maybe the universe wanted me to be in a happy spot to be able to do the work that I do. And Easy to Be You really became an algorithm that has worked for so many people. Sometimes just holding the book and looking at it again and again, your subconscious mind says, oh yeah, it's easy to be me, it's easy to be, and it really reworks your the method or the mad method in your mind, and it makes you believe that it's easy to be me. And it's okay, we don't all have to go through therapy, or we don't all have to go through a major catharsis to change. We can change in simple ways. It's Easy to Be You is, and we go into an interactive space. I just finished this bit about the book. It's Easy to Be You. I broke it down into the form and the formless, because in my, and this is also very dear to me, because Prakriti, which is constructive consciousness, which is fire, water, ether, air, mind, reason, ego, all of that is one part of the consciousness. We can't, constructive consciousness is something we deal with every day. We can't let it go. But we also have Purusha, which is our spiritual life, and Jiva, which is our and I borrow from Hindu mythology because it maybe just helps me sort of find this Advaita Vedanta philosophy. It works for me. I'm not saying this is the only truth, but and I'm not saying I studied it really, but along the way I found that this is something I started to believe in. I found that when we die, Jiva, which is the state which bonds up Purusha and Prakriti, goes back to the higher realm, and Ishwar, which is Purushottam, stays on and continues this whole cycle of birth and death. So I've explained that, and I felt it's important because a lot of people said, why have you written, you're such a happy person, we have so much fun with you, why have you written such a complex book? And to me, if I didn't understand my place in the universe, and I didn't have a goal for myself, which was to align with the purpose of the universe, then to me, none of the other stuff mattered. So it was really me pleasing myself, or me having to put a signature on my involvement, but I felt that I needed to talk about or explain absolute reality, and I talk about that. The second part of the book is about facing really your rational mind. We all have issues, so I have exercises from A being anxiety, B being plateau, C being conditioning. We're all conditioned to do certain things. We're all stuck in certain habitual patterns. So I'm offering you there the tools to work with yourself. Everything about my books and workshops and one-on-one sessions has been about empower the person to find the guru within them, and to be able to, and it's work. It's my sessions are not, and I say to everybody, especially all the Olympians, these very successful, handsome, young, accomplished people sit in the chair, and I say to them, if you really want to make a change in your technique, if you really want to go and forget that failure, because there are more failures than success, you will have to eventually cry in my chair, and they all do. They break down because they're holding on to so much, as we all are, so many emotions, so much of the chaos, so much of the complexity, so much of trying to be competitive, trying to be hardy men and women, and they do cry, they do break down, and they go back and save themselves. So the second part of the book was Irrational Mind, and the third part of the book was very romantic for me. I wrote quotations because I believe that this world is to me Rumi's world, and I'm a Sufi by heart, and I believe that life begins and ends with if you wake up and sing a song and be happy. And to me, I want to leave everybody with just some quotations so they didn't have to go through the complexities of the book. And so that's my book number 1. Book number 2 and 3 were written together. 2 days of this and 2 days of this in the time when we're all looking in COVID times, first 2 months. So I wrote the books in 40 days. Bloomsbury took another 40 days to publish them. And I found that at that point there were too many people wanting to work. I work one-on-one. I've never treated this like a business, so I didn't want to start sitting on the computer addressing people's issues. So I wrote these books so people could find tools to address their issues. There are lots of suggestions. One book is sort of more lighter than the other. One tells the story, the narrative of the universe, how we actually ape nature and mimic nature, because nature decided to not deviate from itself. It has no problem dying, it has no problem living. We have issues living, we have issues dying. So I made nature our icon, and so that book travels the journey of nature. The other book says you will be okay, which is really every page guides you to say, I'm okay even if I failed, I'm okay even if I cheated, I'm okay even through my chaos. And I think these books helped people sitting at home, and they were able to work with it. So I'm going to now open this up to questions so we can make this more interactive and I can make you understand if there's technical questions about hypnosis, sports. Please feel free. Otherwise, this is going to be, I can carry on talking for another 2 hours and it becomes boring. Yeah.
Hi. So first of all, congratulations on your book.
Thank you.
And I have in fact 2 questions, if
Yes.
I may. So I'm Harshil, and my first question is like, how do you deal with the Olympians, because they have been trained since childhood, and so was there a time when they would ask like, do you know how I've been through that journey? Because we are not Olympians and we have not been trained the way they have. So how do you deal with them? And second question is, for example, if we are stuck with a mindset, how do we get out of it?
Okay. Question number 1 is, let me rephrase it and tell me if I'm right. He's asking, how do you work with the Olympian mindset, because he's been training since, or he or she.
Yeah. The person is trained since
they were.
Yeah.
So that's a great question. Thank you. So an Olympian, look at an athlete pretty much like you can look at yourself. Okay. When you wake up in the morning and look at yourself in the mirror, there are parts of you, of your life, that you want to completely remain oblivious to, right? You don't want to wake up and think, I'm not this person, I don't have a great relationship with money, or I don't have a great relationship with my self-worth, I don't have a great relationship with my spouse, or with my job, or I haven't been adventurous enough. An athlete is pretty much that person. He is living more his life outside his game than he is within his game. Yes, the mind is autonomous. Yes, the power switch is in your mind. And yes, you believe, or an athlete believes, or an Olympian believes, after training so much, that he or she is now going to hold on to the perceptions and the training, and those are the only perceptions and training that will sail him or her through the technique. Unfortunately, we have 60,000 thoughts a day, 3 trillion brain cells, and our brain is processing information so fast that outside of their game, they are recording failure. They're recording, my finger freezes when I pick up my gun. My finger is supposed to put 35 grams of pressure at 0.0, and I'm saying air rifle, but I work with air rifle, I work with skeet, I work with double trap, all of that. So different guns, this will be an example. And so I have to learn the game. So I have to learn to shoot. I have to learn, I don't start shooting and I don't start playing badminton and playing tennis, but the algorithm is the same. But I do walk I walk the player through every second, micro second of his or her shot. And the idea of changing and the idea of wanting to change. So A, they don't know where they're stuck. So he will say, I think I'm exerting 35 grams of pressure right in the beginning, but I need to exert 20, hold the gun, and at 0.0 release it. So here's where here's where hypnosis, NLP, all of that training comes into use. I have to go into his brain and teach his brain to relearn his own game. Now somebody like Abhinav, we changed so much. He was an intelligent man, he'd been to therapists around the world. He wanted to make changes in his technique, and he writes about that in his book and mine. Somebody like Ranjan Sodhi, who's got us the maximum medals for this country, didn't want to change anything. He was amazing. He just said, "Kaun dekh raha hai mujhe? Who's watching me?" So different players come are stuck or not stuck. Yeah, they're stuck at different levels of their consciousness, right? So the idea is to get them to rework, and so much is attached to that moment. Like I'm working with a ski player on station number 4. There's a high house and low house, which sends out a disc. On station number 4, she's going to collapse. She's still national number 1. We still haven't worked out station number 4. I'm not giving you the right station because of confidentiality. I'm making this a story, but so she's stuck at that station because something happened when she was training at a very, very, prestigious time of her career, and she hasn't forgiven herself for messing up. So as much as we go back into that, that part, we're not able to let it go. So some of it is technical work, some of it is outside, who am I, why am I mad? Because, for every player who's at that level, all they do is train. Their entire life is about the game. And if they don't, then they're far behind because the competition is too much. And so, yeah, if that answers your question. Yeah? Sorry, what's the second question?
How do you move out of your mindset if you're stuck with something?
To be honest, if you work with yourself for just 1 minute every day, work with your breath every minute or every 30 seconds, every single day, you can rewire any program that you're holding on to simply because the subconscious mind works with repetition. I'll give you a simple example. You have a son, you walk him to the market and you introduce him to the uncle, next door neighbor. Son, here's a neighbor. The kid goes, yeah, whatever, says hi. Not listening, not interested, whoever he is, neighbor. I'm just honoring my dad's wish. He goes to the market 3 days later, or sports shop, whatever, and this uncle comes and says, "Hello, beta, how are you doing?" And the kid looks at him and says, "Who the hell are you? I didn't register you." Cut to, you take him to the market and he's in a sports shop and you go, "Son, meet this uncle." He said, "Yeah. He's the guy who's actually getting you a business class ticket because he's a pilot." And the kid goes, "Really, uncle? How are you doing? Great to meet you." 5 days later, he sees the uncle and he goes, "Hey, uncle, how are you doing?" Because that's of interest to him, right? So if you make something of interest, and so he may not have noticed him if in that moment of time he hadn't taken a breath and registered, "This is good for me." Or you've had people who go to the beach and they see somebody, playing around, but they think that somebody is just dying or, water is taking them away, and they go, and that's it. In that moment is ingrained your fear of water or deep water. And they go back next time to the beach and the guy looks at him and says, "Why don't you go into the water?" And he goes, "Are you scared?" He goes, "No." "Why don't you go into the water?" He's like, "I don't know, I'm just feeling a bit uncomfortable." What happened? He just, within that breath, in that moment, and the reason I'm saying this is not a philosophy because I've taken hundreds of people to their first, you work with asthma, you go back to the time, just taking you back, to the first time ever the kid was under a tree. He's a baby, 4 months old. How am I speaking to a 4-month-old baby? Because I'm able to go back to the files that are recorded in his brain in regression and go back. Of course, they have no idea of semantics. Of course, they have no idea of language. But you address the feeling space and he's feeling stifled because leaves are falling from the tree and that's his asthma. May not be 100% true, but as long as I can go behind that and change and rewire it, we're good. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Hi. So I had a question about something you said towards the end. I found very interesting. About the part where you were like, "Okay, I'm okay. Whatever I do, I'm okay." So what happens to the whole thing about consequences of your actions if you're basically telling everybody that whatever you do, you're okay.
If you're participating in an act of behavior or thought that is aligned with what the universe thinks is okay, you know people in the world get away with murder, right? Honestly, guilt holds you. Guilt is one such entity that you develop that feeds a punishment. Fear is one such entity, and I'm calling them entities because they're not true. You know, everything that you think is just something that exists in you until such time that you will it away. It's like your father saying, you know what, you're going to grow up and be an absolute loser like your mom. She did nothing valuable in life, and you're going to grow up to be a loser. Trust me, I have scores of kids who come, to work with. They've cut their hands, they're over-drugged, over-abused, and I'm looking at the parent and saying, oh Jesus, because in that 45 minutes when the parent has spoken to me, I know it's a parent-induced issue. And I'm not saying that we're supposed to be perfect parents, but all I'm saying is that when you are, it's not your fault that you're in times and situations that you feel in a certain way, but if you try to, I suppose your question is that, can I get away with murder?
No, my question was just like in a practical world.
If in a practical world, if you choose to work with yourself and show integrity to the purpose that you're working with, and you're okay to accept failure, or you're okay to accept, whatever else, you will be okay, because your subconscious mind will say, hey, you're fine. It's funny, but anything I work with, the subconscious mind is the single most powerful goal-inducing entity that you have. And so many times, so my father has this collection of newspapers, and I keep saying, Papa, you're online, you can read the news, you have all these apps, but his mind has made a habitual pattern of collecting National Geographic newspapers, Time magazines. He's not going to be able to rewire his mind. He's not going to be able to rewire. And how much ever he tries, the will is part of your conscious mind, right? If I say to you, can you lift this stage? Can you lift the stage? Probably not. But if I say, hey, can you imagine you can lift the stage? Can you? So you can grow a whole new series of thoughts and behaviors based on using your imagination, creating new beliefs. A belief is something that is not true, right? I believe it's going to rain. I believe it's going to be cold. And that's why I can work with belief patterns, because a belief is not true. If it was true, I'd say, I know it's going to rain. I see the dark cloud. So if that answers your question. Yeah.
Hi. So since we are all hosts, we are parents also. So I always taught my son that there is a mind, and there is a body, and there is a soul. There are three things about illusion. And if you're doing something, so coming from what he said, he said, okay, so let's transpire. So if you're doing something, your body, your soul will tell you it's right or wrong. You have yin and yang, all those stories. But of late, my son tells me that he does not believe in God, or he does not think it's right or wrong, and everything is right and everything is okay. How do I, as a parent, talk to him and see him, make him see a God, or make him see faith, or make him believe?
I'll step back and I'll ask you this question. Yeah. What is your highest belief in life?
Everything which happens for a reason, and God is there.
Okay. And if you retract back and go back into your inner realm, do you believe that you're totally anchored in God and Spirit? Okay. So I'm
anchored to I feel there has to be a pivot in everybody's life. A pivot where you hang on to it, can be a guru, it can be a
perfect.
God,
So you answered your own question.
Yeah.
If you can direct him, and I would say this, if you can ask him to look for the good in everything. Because if you direct children to look for the good in everything, then you're not judging, you're not over-expecting, and while he's looking for the good in something, ask him how much he's deviated from his goal. The minute he steps away from his goal, the minute he starts believing in an entity that is sitting on top of the cloud and taking care of him, he's going to give the responsibility to the entity. So I believe early on in life, if we can teach them to look for that space inside yourself that makes you feel hardy, conscious, then that's your God. And then later it's for them to sort of evolve and find that maybe this God, maybe Hanuman works for me because he gives me strength. Maybe a guru works for me because he speaks philosophy. Maybe Rumi works for me because he shows me poetry and I feel overjoyed because what's our endeavor? Endeavor is to find a society that's looking for collective good. That's healthy, happy people who are, willing to accept each other and their challenges. So that's my answer. Sorry.
Oh, it was sorry. My question was kind of building off of what he said. What are your thoughts? So this is a very Gen Z concept nowadays.
Oh, that's great.
But what are your thoughts about manifestation? Since we're talking about belief.
So manifestation is all that I work with. I think it's an incredible question because that's again. So when I work with athletes, also I work with other people. The power of projection is something that has to be. We have to learn it. We've unlearned it. We've unlearned it because when we go out and work, we are showed, we're made to feel little. When we go out to a competition, we lose. When we go to work, we are, put down. And so we've learned to accept that. We've learned to accept fear, and we've learned to accept this purposelessness, and we've learned to live in this sort of chaotic space. So to learn manifestation, you have to first unlearn all these things and then start constructing stack by stack, brick by brick. I believe that every single manifestation will take shape because I don't believe I believe all of this moment is now. And I believe it because when I work with people, also work with the superconscious mind, which is really the one mind. So there's the mind, individual mind, that connects, and there's also the one mind that is powerful and that makes planets, and that makes all of us humans, and that makes aliens and all of that. And so I'm able to help people quieten the mind and work with the superconscious mind. And when I do, and people start believing that they're one with the divine, they change everything from eczema right there in my chair. And it's not me doing the miracle, it's not even them doing a miracle, it's them going back to understanding that they are here for that miracle, they are here to manifest, they are here to project. So the simple answer would be yes, of course they can project, but the workable answer is you have to learn to do that because your fears are going to stop you from projection. Your procrastination is going to stop you from manifestation. So being human, makes us work with Prakriti and Purusha, like I said. Works with spiritual manifestation of the world, which is beautiful, and the constructive consciousness, which is pulling us down. Water gets, polluted, air gets polluted. So we have to work through it, and that's why the journey of change rests in us, and that's why it's important to me, it's important to take out a product called you, because until you start to believe in yourself, you'll always want to lean on something. You'll always want to have a method. Sorry, there's one here.
Hi Radhika. So a lot of pro athletes talk about visualization. So can you share a little more about what visualization is and how perhaps you can apply it?
Yeah, great question. So visualization. And this is actually a funny one. So when I was working before I started working with Abhinav, and he'd been all over the world, whatever, met lots of therapists. He started training. He was 9. And he was told, and I was told that if you can crack him, then you can work with, all the others. And so there was me trying to, and he's very intelligent, so we were working through a lot of and I'd worked with other athletes, Rajavardhan, a lot of the others, but it's interesting. And so I gave him a great presentation, I was very impressed, and he wanted to work with me. And my first ever script to him was, he'd won many matches, and I was like, oh, you're such a great guy. You're this absolutely amazing hero. And he looked at me and he was like, he said, you're so wrong because I have no self-esteem. I have no self-worth. I think nothing of myself. You couldn't be far from the truth. To answer your question, visualization has to be constructed to play into the neuro-linguistic pattern of the person. So for instance, if I say to this room, let each of us close our eyes, and we can do this, Let each of us close our eyes and go back to something that happened this morning. And as we go back to that one thing that happened this morning, somebody may go back to the time you removed his shirt from the cupboard, somebody may go back to the time you started your car, somebody may go back to a call. And then from that moment, start observing your mind. And see what your mind is saying to you. And start watching your mind, observe your mind. Observe your mind like you're a cat sitting outside a little trap, waiting for a mouse to come out from that trap. So wait and watch and observe your mind. Now you're waiting and watching and observing your mind. And see what your mind is saying to you. You're waiting and watching and observing your mind and see what your mind is saying to you. Waiting and watching. Very gently come back to the sound of my voice, open your eyes. Can anybody describe what happened?
I had a very negative narrative in my mind at the start of the day.
Okay.
I realized how I was just underplaying and it just kept building on itself. And while I watched, I realized, I value made us go through this exercise. I could dissociate and see what I had been doing.
And did you feel yourself in that situation? Did you see it? Were you experiencing it? Were you sort of like, what happened?
I was able to see what I was doing to myself and it was like, what?
Okay, let's pause there. Anybody else?
Yeah, I didn't do anything. At the moment I close my eye, I go into a meditative state.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you. That's where we were meant to be.
Because, I don't know, as a kid, it was different for me. And I was lucky enough. In fact, I want to thank you for the books that you've come out. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Because it's a great lifelong work. Not many people can achieve what you've done.
No, I'm sure you do greater things. Anybody else?
What I was going to say was, why does this happen to me?
I will explain and I want to just answer his question and I'll come to yours. It's very interesting. Anybody else? What about you, sir?
I think I was studying graphic and my mind just kept telling me that.
Okay, were you in that situation? Were you seeing yourself? I
was seeing myself, yeah.
Okay, so to answer his question, each one of us has a neuro-linguistic pattern. Your dominant sense may be visual, your dominant sense may be kinesthetic, so you feel things more. So depending on your dominant sense, you'll have to work with the person, with the athlete, right? Most of my shooters can't see. If I have them imagine something, they can't see. They have to experience it. So every big Olympian has about 80 to 90 anchors that I work with him. Because what if your trapezius muscle doesn't feel right? What if your scapula doesn't feel right? What if the pressure in your right arm doesn't feel right? What if you start shaking? So for everything, there is an anchor that brings them back to calm. And then that calm is aligned, so then they've got to take a breath. So that's a kind of training. So visualization is a concept until it becomes a reality for the sense that you want to make dominant. So for a badminton player, it may be different. And so, does that answer your question?
Yeah, but I'm a businessman, so when I'm trying to visualize how to achieve my goals in business, and I'm not pulling a string or I'm not kicking a ball.
Yeah.
So how do I apply that?
So you would first learn to quieten your mind, and you could anchor in anything. You could look at the color orange, take a breath, makes you feel good. That's a quiet spot. And then make a new association with the color red. And there's your anchor for calm. There's your anchor for motivation. You look at a cloud, there's your anchor for, so you can create different anchors merely by, I'm simplifying it because we're in a group, but it's not so difficult, I have to say.
So you mean my question was similar. So you mean when you were in a business and you're visualizing or manifesting that, okay, I'm doing a project and I start visualizing it. I'm of photographic memory and I visualize a lot, and probably that's yesterday night I couldn't sleep because I was at a project and I came back home and my husband said, today you will not be able to sleep. He knew it. Because
so we also live by this black in our head, right? We give ourselves affirmation saying this is not happening. I'm telling you this. So I'll give you a great example. This may be a story, you know. I don't have a confidentiality contract with every single person, even a 7-year-old kid. I try not to work with younger than 7. And so there's a story where 22 years ago, this gentleman came to see me. He's a really big industrialist. Everybody knew him, and I was like early in my practice, and he came out of this car, and I was running to my, I was late, and I was running to my office, and he comes in. He didn't really like. I worked in a really small place, and he was very uncomfortable. And I said, "Sir, what can I do for you?" And this is very early in my practice. And he goes, "I'm sorry, I'm not using the mic. Is that okay?"
That's right.
And he goes, "I have no confidence." And in my heart, I was like, "You have no confidence?" Like, imagine me. And I've learned not to judge in the practice that we do, the work that we do. You don't, you validate every single expression. And I work back with him, and he goes back to a time when he's 7 years old, cycling with his dad's friends in Sultanpur, which used to be a very rough cycling track. And his dad pushed him, and his cycle fell, and he gave him a hand, and he said, and his dad, mind you, was from Oxford. Okay, so this is like a real, and his dad said, "Let me give you a hand, son, or you'll never get started." Exactly these words. This is the gentleman, you may know him, I'm giving it away a little bit. He was on the magazine, he was on the cover of either Time or Forbes or one of them, with a plane. There was an aeroplane and a board of directors on it, caricature, and they thought it was a style statement, but he just couldn't get things started. But because he had the legacy of the business, and he also went to one of these big schools, he became who he became. And he came to work with me when he was 62, and he kept taking himself back to the time where his father said, "Let me give you a hand, son, you'll never get started." Is this 100% true? I don't know, but when we worked on this, and we got this off him, he was back in his power, and he was like, "Oh my God, I'm so relieved." And he was like, "I want to come work with you every Saturday," and I said, "Sir, I don't work Saturdays, but I'd work with his daughter, so he'd come to me." But yeah, he's doing really well, and he's off that statement. So what brings us down, what narrows our our lives to meet certain nuances of certain territories which are not good or dark. Or I work with a lot of girls who are raped. A lot of the athletes, Indian athletes, have been traveling. Horrible story, I shouldn't be saying it, but the world is not such a kind place, and some of them, because they're in such unimaginative success in their lives, they can't come back. They're stuck in this whole structure, so I work with a lot of those girls. Give them the courage and to find a way to go forward. And sir, just to answer your question, that was excellent, because when you go for a meditation camp, you prepare yourself for a month and say, "I'm going in the month of end of March when the weather's really good to Nainital or whatever, Bahamas, Ibiza, going for this great meditation camp, and I'm going to learn how to quieten my mind in this beautiful environment, and my mind is going to be still. I'm going to come back and I'm going to be so calm." It doesn't happen. And then 30 seconds into that exercise, where I didn't think that I was teaching you, I didn't say I was teaching a meditation, you let your thoughts go, and you found calm. And if you were in my chair and I helped you anchor, you'd stay with that anchor for the rest of your life. And that's exactly what...
I do agree with one thing you said. Find the second God is the spirit. I agree.
Yeah.
But then my training was a little different.
We can agree to disagree.
I am not contradicting anybody anything. What you've done is great, because not many people have the chance to go through this and have someone help them get through the difficulties. I, as a child, I was in a school where physical training was mandatory. Twice a week we had to run 10 miles. And the teacher was an Olympian who held a stick. He said, "I'm running everybody in front of me. Or anybody falls on it, gets a whack on the back." After that, I was lucky enough, I found a master to teach me martial arts. I had my physical problems, I have my difficulties. But the training of mind over matter, the physical body, the mind was way over the physical mind. And that's what brought me to this stage.
And I suppose you believe that diligence and hard work in finding that mind is in finding mind over matter is something that everybody needs to do.
I hope people can find, or maybe, I don't know, I'm no psychologist. If something like that can be added, it might help a few more people, that's all.
Right.
I guess so.
Anybody else have questions? Yeah.
What similarities have you found between the mindsets or mentalities of like top athletes and top like corporate people that you work with?
Okay, so they're all struggling to find themselves. They're all struggling to wake up in the morning and feel happy. Anybody who's working to meet higher goals is putting themselves on the tremendous sort of like a tremendous, is walking their journey, I should say, and taking up a challenge. And I think it's brilliant. It's brilliant when you can challenge yourself to find greater purpose, to be a leader. There's luck, there's destiny, but there's a lot of hard work, and there's a lot of questioning your intent every other time. Question your intent, question your purpose, and seeking to share your joy. And I don't think that's something that comes very easily. I have to say, so a lot of people who work with me, a lot of psychologists. We have a psychologist here. She's doing some incredible work. And my only issue with psychology as a science is that psychologists allow the person to believe that it will take time and effort and struggle and labels to get where they need to get. The only place I believe I've differed is in my life I've never fixed a second session. I worked with really amazing people, actors, international actors, Olympians, all of that. I've never felt the greed to fix another session. I've never told a story, or I've never come home and said to my husband, today I worked with somebody who got raped. It's not a label for me to wear. It's not something that makes me happy. And I think what the world needs to do is give the power back to people. I don't believe we can package something and say, you will take 5 sessions to get better. You will take 3. Oh, sir, you've got 5 labels. You're going to take 3 months. Doesn't work like that. If I give you another chance, you'll never break down in my chair. If I tell you you're going to come back next Thursday, you will never tell me you cheated on your wife. You will never cry. It's very different with athletes because you have to keep training them. It's a very different game. But even with athletes, I mean, every single person I work with, all of these players, Gautam Gambhir, I mean, all of them have learned. Then they'll call me and give me one funny one saying, hey, I did this, you think it's okay? I'm like, it's cool. It's worked for you. It's great. We tweak it a little. But that's really the power of you. I really believe in it. I believe that if you can empower people, then they are literally synonymous with God. Because they're walking a happy journey towards a success. Sorry, was there another question I missed? I said if you let me talk, I'll keep talking. So please keep coming back.
So do you think waking up in the morning happy vis-a-vis fighting for a goal or a success?
You know what? We can say this because this is a room of luxury.
Yeah.
People who have a lot of luxury. I don't believe that. I'll give you a really quick example. I did a survey way back in college, and there was this way to find out. This kid said that when my father comes back home, what is your happiest connect? And the kid says, when my father comes back home and he gives me one tight slap, I'm happy. Why? Because his father was a coal pusher in a sabji market, and all the other kids, the sabji walas, were always around. And this kid was like, my father's never there, but the father came back drunk, slapped the kid and said, oi, how are you doing? He was like, man, that was my happiest moment, my father's home. So I don't think we can wake up in the morning and all of us have the entitlement to be happy. I don't believe a conceptual reality of being happy or joyous or successful or moneyed or wealthy can necessarily make you go from point A to point B. And does that answer your question?
Yeah, so I have a thought. My daughter, the conversation I had with her.
Sorry, we'll take that. I'm sorry.
So I wanted to know, I went through some mental challenges, and so the issue was that I wanted to discover, is there a purpose of my life? And then I discovered something. But now I'm questioning that, is that the real purpose?
So what do you feel, sir?
So right now, I personally feel that purpose of my life is to be useful.
Okay. And does that show up? Does it recur that does that feeling show up all the time?
What does that mean?
Does that feeling come to you at every point in time? Does that feeling come back saying, oh, this is the purpose I was here to meet? And then again...
So that makes me happy.
Correct.
But I really don't know, is that the real purpose for which?
So I'll say only one thing to that. You'll have to walk that journey to discover. I don't believe without this journey we would be where we all are, right? Very interesting. Can I ask this place why the AC stopped functioning? Or is it only stopped functioning for me?
No, it was getting very cold.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, is that okay with everybody?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
So my question is, so does the purpose keep shifting, or do we at some point in life, do we really discover what we are born for?
Well, that's a really hard question, but do we really discover what we're... if you sustain your goal and you work hard and you're diligent to meet that purpose could be making money, or that purpose could be, building a Hanuman statue, or it could be like climbing Kilimanjaro, whatever it could be. Will you know whether that's the greatest purpose, or was there something greater in your kitty?
No, it's not about having a greater purpose. So like, God has been kind, I've been through a holistic exposure in life, but I went through some real big mental challenges, and during those 6 months my brain was only asking, why am I alive, what is the purpose, and then suddenly, I don't know whether I made it up or I discovered that I want to be useful.
So what would be the calling? What is the greater calling? To feel the need to walk to meet that purpose, or is the greater calling to say, I'll shy away from this and let the world decide what is my calling? Is the calling coming through you, or is it driven from an external sort of state?
Honestly,
what is more important?
So honestly, as of now, it appeals to me that of all the things, if I end up being useful, then it is fine.
So I'll tell you, sir, I'll go back to answer your question. I was in a train going from Delhi to Bhopal, and this passenger, we were in that 4 coupe, and the passenger, and I wanted him to, and there was another coupe available, and he said, and I was traveling with my mother-in-law and my baby, and I said, sir, can you go to the next, coupe, it's free, and he said, he was enjoying this whole conversation, and there's a lady sitting here, and this is very boring. He said, well, if we can talk for a while, I can have my dinner and move to the other one. I was like, okay, we can have a conversation as long as you move on. And then I was telling him my life story, because then we started talking. He was a really nice gentleman. And he said, do you know why you're doing regression therapy? I was like, okay, it's interesting. Why don't you answer it for me? Exactly like you're asking me. And he said, when you made films, and so when you make films, you are looking at the art direction, the time of day. You're breaking down the sequence by sequence. You're adding sound, music, aesthetics, feeling. And I then look back and I said, that's incredible, because I made so many films so fast. When I look back now, and I never thought it was a wasted career, because I love doing that as well. But when I look back and I was like, that's interesting, because that was great training for what I did for the rest of my life. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think we have to walk through, we have to journey through life to sort of realize if we are going the right way. And if you all knew our purpose, then we'd all be sitting here as Babas, like a lot of other people are, and having a lot of following, and not struggling in our respective fields and careers, or struggling to, this could be a struggle. I mean, it looks great, but maybe I'm struggling. Maybe I'm struggling to wake up every morning and saying, okay, what's the next book? I actually am, what's going on? What's the next thing I can do which makes it easier? Maybe this is too. It's like this narrative is really complex for a lot of people. I can read it every day and I find a different nuance in it. This is for some people, this is the easiest book, because like everything about this is like, you're okay, you did this, so it really depends on where you are in your life too. Sorry, so we go back to your question.
Firstly, I just found the talk so fascinating. And
thank you.
Congratulations to you all on this journey.
Very impressive.
Thank you.
I had a talk with my daughter this morning, which kind of is, your talk seems a continuation of that. I was telling her, aren't you too young?
I'm feeling younger and humble.
So she is doing a double major in psychology and criminal justice. So she's delving deep into the psyche and into the world of crime. And her whole thing was today about all that is wrong with the world. Like you said, the world is not a kind place, and the dark side of it. And questioning that a lot, and in terms of whether it's the earthquake or the Ukraine war, all the crimes that you see all around. So her whole question was that, and I was jokingly saying, aren't you too young for an existential crisis, because she was saying God got the blueprint wrong.
So at that time, when you have a child questioning what's wrong in the world, and that is the reality, and it is wrong, and how do you answer that? How do you take that conversation forward?
Again, a really hard question. But from what I know about the spirit, we're in a manifestation that is really for this. The spirit wants to know itself, and for it to know itself to be complete, it is going to take us. It's going to be a very hardy journey, because without it being a hardy space and without it being challenging, there is no lesson to be learned. So all these are part of that. If you look back at, there was Satya Yuga, then there was Treta Yuga, then there was Dwapar Yuga, and now we stepped into Kali Yuga, which is going to go on for eons. And so these are things that we've learned through mythology and texts and the Vedas. But they talk about the journey of, at some point there was a manifestation of the divine. There was Ram to manifest that era. There was Krishna to manifest that era. There's, Kali Yuga is going to have apparently Krishna, the worst ever incarnation of Krishna is Kalki, which is going to be a black Krishna on a horse, which is what we hear. So the point being, going back to answer your question, I believe the journey will transcend many, many different lifetimes. And yet to me, all of this is happening now. So if in our present, because for me, if I work with an obsessive compulsive disorder, stammering, trauma, a rape, I'm just saying, an Olympian trying back to win his medal, which is more difficult than the first time he wins it, because he doesn't know how the first time, what that experience is. All of this could be equally challenging, or something that seems more challenging can be less challenging for somebody else. So it's really where your perspective is. I think to children, we need to let them, to show them that they have to look for, the best part of themselves to show up through their consciousness.
That was the only thing we can really well. Oh, and thank you, you answered it that really well.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else for questions or?
Yeah, as you said, people ask purpose of life. Okay, I put a purpose in my purpose is that I must do this in my life. At that point, it's unattainable. Once I attain that point, and I put another, is that a normal thing or is it correct?
Does your purpose keep changing, and is that okay for you to
Once
validate?
You can say if it's not a purpose, it's a milestone. Once I cross that, okay, I set myself another one.
So you're not one of those people who's going to buy a great big cruise and invite all of us and say, life is done, I am going to go and enjoy myself. No, I think to answer that question, I believe the purpose of your life will be dictated by how it makes you feel within yourself. And I don't believe that we can compare one to the other. The yardstick or the measurement stick that you use has to be very different from the person who may have had the same life, because your perspectives have accumulated over a period of years, and so they're dictating your journey. I don't think it's going to